Thank you very much. And uh, I'm glad y'all chose me to do this today because I need to know more about Salado. Most of my family on both my mother's and father's side are from all over Bell County. But for some reason, I don't know, and none of the old folks in my family knew, both my great-grandfathers on my mother's side and my father's side said they were born in Salado for reasons we don't know. So I'm glad I got to do this. I'm definitely not an expert on Colonel Robertson, but I'm hoping that I can, for those of you who might not know too much about him, put him in his place. That's really tiny, but this is a timeline of some important events in the 1800s in Texas history. Over here on the left is 1821, when Mexico gets its independence from Spain, and Stephen F. Austin brings the first Anglo settlers from the United States. Here's 1836, where Texas declares its independence. Here's 1845, where Texas joins the Union. Here's the U.S.-Mexican War from 1846 to 1848. Over here in 1861 is when Texas secedes and joins the Confederacy. The Civil War till 1865. Reconstruction in Texas, and then the Texas Constitution of 1876, which is the Constitution that still runs the state today. All right. Colonel Robertson's life spanned this entire period, and he, through his family, touches almost every major event in Texas from the time Mexico got its independence in 1821 to the Constitution of 1876. So he is kind of a springboard for learning more about the history of Texas. Let's do a little genealogy. Here's Colonel Robertson down here at the bottom, the guy that we're going to talk about today. But his grandfather, Elijah Robertson, and his granduncle, James Randolph Robertson, in 1779, settled on the Cumberland River in the middle of Tennessee when it was part of western North Carolina. They built a fort there that they called Fort Nashboro, named after a patriot general in the Revolutionary War. And eventually, in 1784, that town took the name Nashville. So Colonel Robertson's grandfather was one of the founders of Nashville, and his granduncle is called the father of Middle Tennessee. That exploring and creating civilization from wilderness spirit was passed from Elijah Robertson to his son, Sterling Clack Robertson. Sterling Clack Robertson was born in 1785 in Nashville, Tennessee. He served in the War of 1812 under Major General William Carroll in 1814 and 1815 when they fought at the Battle of New Orleans in Louisiana. In 1822, he was one of the original Tennessee stockholders in a company formed in Nashville called the Texas Association. Sometimes it was just called the Nashville Company, that asked the Mexican government for permission to settle people from the United States in Mexican Texas. In 1825, he visited where he was going to try to set up his colony, and he started trying to bring in settlers in 1830. I'm not going to go into too much detail on other aspects of his life, his conflict with Stephen F. Austin, and a whole bunch of things, because let's move on to his son in a second. I forgot I had this slide in here. Eventually, in 1834, Robertson was made impresario of the colony that was called Robertson's Colony, or the Tennessee Colony, or it had some other names as well, or the Nashville Colony. It is this area right here with these diagonal lines. And to show you where that is, Bell County is the cross-hatched thing here in the middle. And this is Stephen F. Austin's original colony. In 1835, notice there's another Nashville. In 1835, Colonel Sterling Robertson founded the town of Nashville on the Brazos River, about where the Little River meets the Brazos in present-day Milam County. And until the 1840s, that was the county seat. It was the head of the Robertson colony and then the county seat of Milam County until it was moved to Cameron. This is a map from the time period. This is an 1845 map. Here you can see Milam County and Robertson County, named after the Robertsons. And there's Nashville right there. And this river that's called the San Andres, St. Andrews River, is the Little River. You'll notice out here, Lampasas and Salado Creek. Or in Spanish, it should be, of course, Salado Creek, salty. Which brings us to Elijah Sterling Clack Robertson. He was born on his father's plantation in Giles County, Tennessee. He was originally christened after his named after his father, just Sterling Clack Robertson. He came with his father to Texas in December of 1832, and he went to a Catholic school in San Antonio where he learned Spanish. And apparently the priests there didn't like that he didn't have a traditional Christian name, so he got the name Elijah that way. He didn't really use Elijah. He went by Sterling in most letters written to him and references to him in the time period. By 1834, he'd learned enough Spanish to be working on for his father, translating Spanish deeds and documents. In 1835, he joined a ranging company, the ancestor of the Texas Rangers, to help repel Indian raids. And this is apparently where he first encountered the waters of Salado Creek and the springs of Salado Creek. Meanwhile, after troubles between the Mexican government and the settlers in Texas turned to war at Gonzales in October of 1835, Elijah's father, Sterling C. Robertson, was elected as a delegate from the municipality of Milam, his colony basically, along with his nephew, Elijah's cousin, George C. Childress. They went to Washington on the Brazos in 1835, where George C. Childress was the primary author of the Texas Declaration of Independence, which was ratified on March 2nd, 1836. And Sterling C. Robertson, here's his signature on the Texas Declaration of Independence. He also signed the first Constitution of Texas, the Constitution of the Republic of Texas. Meanwhile, what was Elijah doing? Elijah served as a ranger from January to November 1836 for the Republic of Texas. And family stories say that his father tasked him with taking all of his records from the Robertson colony to safekeeping in the United States by ox cart, which, as the runaway scrape is moving east, after the battles of the Alamo and the Goliad, and Santa Anna's army is moving deeper into Texas, and Sam Houston is falling back. Imagine a young 16-year-old kid trying to wrangle an ox cart full of documents to safety. And that's what Elijah is doing. Meanwhile, his father, Sterling, is serving in Houston's army and is at the Battle of San Jacinto on April 21st, 1836. And in this famous painting from 1886 of the surrender of Santa Anna, here you see Santa Anna, and here you see Sam Houston with his broken leg. If you zoom into that guy right back there, that's Colonel Robertson's father, Sterling C. Robertson. Once the war was over and Texas had earned its independence, from 1837 to 1839, Elijah Robertson was sent back to Tennessee, where he went to a college that no longer exists, a Presbyterian college named Jackson College in Columbia. He returned to Texas during the presidency of Marlboro B. Lamar, and he served as a clerk in the Republic of Texas Post Office Department, rising to the position of chief clerk. From October 1839 to January 1840, he was acting postmaster general when the other guy got too sick to do the duties. In 1841 and 1842, he was the assistant secretary of the Senate of the Republic of Texas. And from 1840 to 1842, he did that in Austin. And this is a painting of Austin as it existed in 1841. Okay? If you look very closely, you can see some hippies. In 1842, twice, Mexican armies came up from the Rio Grande and took over the city of San Antonio. President Sam Houston is back in charge. He orders a guy named Alexander Somerville to organize the militia and volunteers to chase the Mexican forces and make sure they don't come back in south down towards the Rio Grande. After attending to the death of his father, in March 1842, Elijah Robertson was elected captain of a regiment in Somerville's expedition and followed the Mexican army south to the Rio Grande, took over the city of Laredo, and then he had the good sense to go back home. Because after this, the Somerville expedition, most of the people went back home. The ones that stayed became part of the Mier expedition and attacked the town of Mier and were surrounded by Mexican forces. And that's when they had to do the famous black bean episode, where 1 out of every 10 that drew a black bean out of a bowl of white and black beans was executed. In 1844, President Houston commissioned Robertson a colonel of the 2nd Regiment, 1st Brigade of the Militia of the Republic of Texas. And that's where he got the title colonel that he used the rest of his life. Even when he was a brigadier general, he's still referred to by everybody as a colonel. In the fall of 1845, after reading the law for several years, Colonel Robertson earned his law license from the Republic of Texas. Here's a copy of his law license granted by Judge Baylor of the Baylor family of Baylor fame. In 1848, Colonel Robertson was a translator of Spanish deeds for the General Land Office in Austin. And in 1854, he moved his family to some springs that are going to be called the Robertson Springs on Salado Creek, just across the highway from here. And he began construction of his homestead. His magnificent home is going to really start getting built in 1856 and is going to be mostly finished by 1860. In the mid-1850s, he tried to create a town near a fort that's in now Hill County, called Fort Graham, a town that was going to be called Robertson, but it failed. In 1858, he was elected chief judge of Bell County, and in 1860, he was made brigadier general of Texas state troops. In 1850, Bell County was organized, and you can see on this early map, this is from 1857, of the counties here in central Texas. Here's Fort Graham, where he tried to build a settlement called Robertson. And here's Bell County. There's Belton between the Lampasas and all of these rivers. That's basically the Leon. And you see Salado Creek down here, but no town of Salado yet. You see it's marked Three Forks. During all this time, Colonel Robertson is building a family. His first wife, there at the top, Eliza Hamer Robertson. And his second wife, after his first wife died, Mary Elizabeth Dickey Robertson. And he ended up having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 children. Whew! I can't handle one. This is a 1936 image of the home that, of course, still exists, the Robertson home. In 1859, Colonel Robertson offered to donate land both north and south of Salado Creek to build a college and a town. A company was created called the Salado Joint Stock Company. Here's a blank piece of stock, and town lots were laid out to build an institution of learning and a town. Here you see an advertisement in a Houston newspaper for sale of town lots in Salado, that you're going to have college buildings, and that it's near the geographical center of the state. Here's an 1872 map of Bell County, and you'll notice Salado. Okay. This is a tracing of some original town lots from 1866, redone by an artist named Jack Jackson in 2005. And you'll notice here's Salado Creek and Main Street, which is still where it is. And here you see Royal Street and Front Street. And here is College Hill. Okay? And there is the brewery where I drink beer. And I was just there last night. Now, Notice the military uniform, notice the collar you just saw. Like many a wealthy slaveholder and Democrat in Texas in the 1850s, Colonel Robertson, along with many Southerners, felt that Northerners, Republicans, and abolitionists were either going to restrict slavery and make it unprofitable to try to get rid of it, or just outright abolish it altogether. And after the election of Abraham Lincoln, South Carolina got the ball rolling with seceding from the United States and trying to form their own country. And lots of people in Texas, including Colonel Robertson, thought that was the best way to do it. They wanted to secede. They didn't think they were doing anything wrong. Hadn't the Americans seceded from the British when they created the United States? Hadn't the Texans seceded from Mexico when they created the Republic of Texas? So the people of Bell County elected Colonel Robertson a delegate to the secession convention in Austin. And he voted for secession. And he signed the secession convention. This is a little note card where he says, I'm writing this with the same pen and I'm signing this with the same pen that I signed the secession convention that took Texas out of the Union in 1861. The whole state voted, and the majority of people that could vote voted for secession. Bell County voted for a secession by a vote of 495 to 198. After secession was completed, the Texas joins the Confederate States of America. Colonel Robertson was appointed aide-de-camp to General Henry McCulloch in 1862, and he spent the first several months of the war organizing regiments all around Central Texas, an area he was very familiar with. He served a lot of the war in Central Texas, writing intelligence reports, writing reports about how Indians were attacking the frontier, guiding slave patrols, and he spent a huge chunk of his fortune supporting the Confederate war effort. When the war ended, he retained his lands, but his dozens of black slaves were freed. Many of the formerly enslaved that lived on his lands decided to work his land for wages once the war was over, although in future years he hires white workers and Hispanic workers to take up the slack. All through the Reconstruction years in the 1860s and 1870s, there was a lot of political turmoil in Texas, economic turmoil in Texas, and societal turmoil in Texas. But Robertson spent these years building up his fortunes and pushing and extolling and cheerleading the Salado College and the village of Salado that he was instrumental in creating. But his time as a politician were not over. White Democrats in Texas didn't like the radical government set up after the war by Republicans. And so when Democrats gained control of the legislature in 1874 and the governorship in 1874, Governor Richard Coke called for a constitutional convention in 1875 to write a new constitution to replace the Constitution of 1869. Once again, Colonel Robertson was elected to represent Bell County. Here's his official portrait from the Constitutional Convention of 1875. He voted to support the document that they wrote in 1875, and Texas voters approved the document in 1876. And as I mentioned, that is the Constitution that is still in effect to this day. Here is Colonel Robertson's tattered copy of the Constitution that he helped write and he helped vote for. Now, one last thing. Robertson, in many letters after the Civil War, talks about his dislike for railroads. He says that they are large monopolies that would create a moneyed oligarchy and a permanent class of poor people, which is perhaps why he never pressed for Salado to get a railroad. So he made Salado what it is in so many ways, by stressing education and building a college here, by laying out this wonderful town, and by keeping the railroad way, it lessened the chances Salado was ever going to be a big, huge town. So if you like Salado the way it is, it's another reason to thank Colonel Robertson. I hope this quick outline I've given you of Colonel Robertson's history, if you didn't know it, helps you appreciate not only the contributions he made to Salado, but the contributions he made to Texas. And furthermore, the fact that you can talk about Texas history and use examples from his life to illustrate, and his ancestors to illustrate all these things that make Texas the way it is. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you for inviting me.